what is a cue and how do we use cues in training? So cues are a very important part of training. They're a very important part of communication. A cue is basically something that signals a behavior. A cue can be something that we train, like when we squeeze with our legs, the horse walks forward. Or a cue can be something that maybe we're not quite as aware of. For example, if we come into the barn and we've had a stress day and we've got that certain tightness on our face, and our horse sees that and reacts to that by moving to the back of the stall. That cue, that expression on our face can actually serve as a cue to trigger a behavior from a horse. So here's an example of how subtle cues can actually be and how sometimes we're not aware of them, just like the one I gave. If you remember the story of Clever Hans, he was the horse that was thought to be very intellectual, that he could do arithmetic problems and he could count. But it was actually discovered that it wasn't his intellect, he wasn't doing these problems in his head. Instead, he was watching and he was getting cues from his owner. So as he would near the right answer, his owner, the expression would change subtly, and Clever Hans was picking up on that. Humans actually do the same thing. There's research by John Gottman and Paul Ekman, are the two main ones that have researched micro movements and micro expressions in humans and how much those little expressions and those little movements that we do, those little parts of body language, can trigger our feelings or our behaviors when we're around other people. So that's a little bit of an aside, just a little bit of an understanding of how cues can be something that's very obvious, like a squeeze of our leg, or a cue can be something from us, from the horse's environment, that sets off a behavior that we're not necessarily completely aware of. Now I'm here with Belle, and we're going to talk about how the concepts of learning theory, and specifically of pressure and release, since that's a lot of what happens when we are riding the horse, because we're sitting on them. We have our weight, we have pressure cues that we use when we use the reins, when we use our legs, and even when we shift our weight. We're using pressure and release. So I'm going to demonstrate how we use this concept in our riding to even get simple responses, and how it can start to improve problems that you might be having, such as a horse that's going too fast or going too slow. So I'm just going to show with Belle doing really simple walking forward, asking her to stop, and then we're going to focus a little bit more on riding a backup, because that's an area that a lot of people kind of struggle with applying the idea of releasing pressure. So as I start getting ready to move forward here, first, even just the act of me picking up the reins and shifting my weight a little bit was a cue to Belle that we're about to do something. And you could see, instead of just standing like she was, she started to kind of shift her weight and get ready to move as well. So when I want her to walk forward, the cue is going to be a little shift, and then I'm going to give her a squeeze. If I needed to do more from that, I could use more pressure. I could bump with my legs. I could carry a whip and give her a little tap with the whip. But as soon as she walks forward, even that first initial step, I want to release the pressure. This is often what happens with horses that don't go forward well, is the rider never releases the pressure for going forward. So now if I want to ask her to halt, I'm going to think about taking a little shift of my weight back, filling out my back. That's the cue. And then I can shorten my reins so that I can put some pressure on the reins. That's a pressure. And then as soon as I feel her feet stop, I release the pressure. Even though she's taking these little extra steps, it's important to have that release of pressure in there so that the horse is still getting reinforced, so it's still getting communicated to the horse that that was the right thing. That stopping was the right thing. Even if they take the extra step, we then use the pressure again, remind for the halt, and we release again. So now I'm going to ask Belle for a backup. And what What a lot of riders commonly do for the backup is they just hold the pressure. People have different cues for asking for a back, but a lot of people will shorten the reins, apply backward pressure with the reins, sometimes not even doing anything with their seat, and they just hold the reins and hold the reins. And you can see Belle's responding quite nicely that she's backing up, but if I just stayed here and never gave her a release, she's pretty soon going to start trying something else. She might try going sideways in the backing up. She might try flinging her head up and down. She might even get frustrated, and if she doesn't have the personality, but hotter horses will sometimes then start to rear and pop up because they're looking for a way to find the release when it's not happening. So instead I'm going to ask Belle to back up, but I'm going to use the concept of pressure and release, remembering that the release is what tells her that was the right thing. So what I'm going to do is just organize my reins. I'm going to shift back from here. That's the cue. I applied a little pressure and I softened it as soon as she stepped back. So I'm going to do that again. A little pressure, soften for the step back. Little pressure, soften for the step back. So the cue of my weight shift is still asking her to go back, but I've got this little soften with my hands. That's the release. So anytime that you're riding, you want to make sure that you're releasing your pressure, whatever aid it is and whatever response you're looking for, that you release the pressure on the correct response from the horse. The most important thing to remember with cues is that consistency will create reliability. So the more consistent you can be in the cues that you use and the responses that you expect from those cues, the better that your horse is going to be able to reliably respond correctly. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me one cue that your horse understands the best. If you're not watching this on horseclass.com, that's where the best conversation is. And we have hundreds more free videos like this one and premium courses to help you find the joy in your riding and connect with your horse.